what Inklings works.
Yep. Hello, hail, and well met, and welcome to the Ea Tolkien Society. I am Hawk Robinson. There we go. We are an official Smial, a chapter of the UK Tolkien Society. We meet typically on the third Saturday of each month from 1 to 3 p.m. Pacific time. Hang on just a second. I have a dog getting into things I need to stop. Yeah. So I'm going to go chase. There's the puppy. There's Mort. We will be going around, everybody saying hello, and then we're going to jump into our meeting notes from the last meeting. Of course, TolkienScholars.org is the website. You can view our meeting notes and previous meetings there, all the way back to 2005.
Yeah, Brian.
And then the teaser today is we're going to be covering, starting to cover the Inklings, and do a little bit of a dive into, is it Charles Williams we're going to start with?
Yep.
Charles Williams for this session. Of course, we welcome anybody else, any other topics related to Tolkien, peers, inspirations, in spite of, things like that. But somehow related to Tolkien, and feel free to post comments in the YouTube chat or in the Jitsi chat if you're here in the meeting. Some of us are here in Spokane, Washington, others are joining remotely. Brian, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and introduce the others while I go take the dog upstairs.
Very good.
Come on, Mort. Come on, puppy. Come on.
All right. I'm Brian Huseland, and the secretary of the Smial, and a member of the Ea Tolkien Society of the United Kingdom and the rest of the world.
Awesome. Hello, my name is Anthony of the East Farthing. I've been a member, an unofficial member since 2017, thereabouts, and I officially joined the International UK Tolkien Society last year, or the year before, and yeah, excited to be here.
Great. And then those of you online, you want to go ahead and share your, introduce yourself for those who might be watching?
Elder statesman first.
Gary, I think that means you.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Very
I
flattering.
don't consider myself an older statesman, and
Well, it's a compliment.
even though I'm a senior citizen now. I'm Gary Hagman, live in Mountain Home, Idaho, and I intend to join the Tolkien Society, but you know what they say, the road to hell is paved with. But one of these days I get around to it. But somebody has to nag me. I've been attending these meetings. I think the first one was last June, and off and on. We moved from Western Washington over here in September, and we got everything together. But enjoyed very much, and I'm a Tolkien aficionado or whatever since I was in college in 1965. That dates me. Okay, Chris, cheers.
Chris.
Yes, hello, I'm Chris Cooperstein. I have been a member of the Tolkien Society for many years. I don't know, 8 or so. And I live in southeast Washington, surrounded by desert and farm and ranch land, and enjoy it very much. And I consider myself part of the south part where long bottom leaf is grown.
Nice.
That's not the only thing growing there.
No, the Queen Anne cherries on the tree outside our house will be ready in about 3 weeks.
Oh,
Okay.
nice.
Well, welcome everybody. Glad that you are all with us, and I will be reading the notes for last meeting, which was in April. So let me just pull those up for you. And actually, I should probably do this off of the website because Hawk, I think, put in the links. So, all right, hold on one second.
Is it TolkienScholars.org?
It's www.2.tolkienscholars.org.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah. But I think I'll just read the notes off of that I have on the computer because, yeah, it's just missing the links is all. Okay, so last time when we met was actually April 16.
And I do have it up on the website, and I did add those links.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I couldn't find it right away, but I know they're there. So I'm just going to read off my copy.
Okay.
So last time we had attending Hawk, Brian, Anthony, Sarah from Italy, Gary, and Chris. And actually, Zara sends her regrets. She will not be able to join us today. We had an introduction in which we talked about Chaucer and Dante and the wellspring of our own modern languages of English and Italian. I read the March 19 notes, and then we had a discussion together, interleaved with the reading of the notes. Topics mentioned in reading the March notes included the update on the RPG Community Center with donations available at www.rpgresearch.com/donate. I think I made a typo in there, so I think we need to catch that. I only put 2 W's in there. And also Smial.amazon.com for if you're making Amazon purchases. It's a small portion of that does go towards the charity of choice RPG research. We also discussed the topic of Other Minds magazine. It's for scholarly and gaming interests, and that's at otherminds.net. We discussed as well the tension between northern sources, which any study of Tolkien includes the fact that he was influenced by a northern mythology, and yet also that clearly there's a universal applicability, which we love about Tolkien's works, and so both of these things are good. We want to support both of those. We then read letter 200 of from Letters of Tolkien, which was dated on the 25th of June 1957, and actually had to do with Tolkien's explanation of the overarching mythology of his works in Middle-earth. And then there was a reference to the book by Tom Shippey. Actually, I think he's editor. I think. No, I'm sorry. They're all.
They're all essays. He compiled
Yes,
them.
He compiled them.
Yeah.
But did he write? He wrote them? But it's called Roots and Branches.
Yeah, I forget because some he wrote and some he's an editor.
But there's one essay by, I think it's an essay by Shippey.
Over the years, he has written and lectured widely on Tolkien-related topics. Many of these essays, though still topical, no longer available. This volume unites for the first time a selection of his older essays together with some new as yet unpublished.
Very good. So it's Shippey's
it's
essays.
Exactly.
But he's compiled them together. So
Yeah.
worth having a
There's
owning
good
a
stuff
copy,
in
really.
here.
And you
Yeah.
can't get it on Amazon or anything.
It's hard to get,
I believe it.
really?
and it's often very expensive.
Yeah.
It can sometimes be hundreds of dollars or even thousands of dollars.
Wow.
So I am
Well, that's okay. I already have a couple books.
happy to let you read it here, but and this will be part of the museum.
A particular essay was recommended, which was Allegory versus Bounce.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to see if it's available just as an essay out there, and it is on JSTOR, but you have to have a subscription to
Right.
JSTOR through an academic institution.
Or probably
which you
pay
would.
$35 for the essay.
Exactly.
That's typical.
So that would be a big chunk of change, but it would be maybe cheaper than buying the book.
Right.
And I'm just looking right now on Amazon for Roots and Branches.
Mm-hmm.
So no doubt it's
Why don't you continue and I'll look that up for you.
okay. You go ahead. Yep. So anyway, it depends on sometimes it's available, sometimes not. But there's some great material in there. Also a discussion of Amazon's Rings of Power, the show that's debuting in September, as we're continuing to keep a watchful eye upon the developments to see how that's faring. And then we spent the bulk of our time actually on looking at Tolkien's impact, and we have transitioned from later people who really didn't know Tolkien to people who lived at the same time or soon afterwards. So, for example, Fritz Leiber, I guess is how we say it, lived from 1910 to 1992. We talked about Leiber's background with theater. He coined the phrase swords and sorcery, and he wrote stories specifically. What really made him quite famous were the Fafhrd and Grey Mouser stories, two thieves who usually do good. And he was influenced by a number of authors like Lovecraft, Howard Graves, Joseph Campbell, and William Shakespeare. But there's even though it's not a direct influence by Tolkien, there's a lot of interesting. They're kind of in the same ecosystem. He was named. So Fritz Leiber was named the Worldcon's second Gandalf Grand Master after Tolkien. And so there were, and I did not, and so Hawk included the link on the notes, but there's a specific thing about swords and sorcery and Sprague de Camp.
And I found a link for that as well.
Good. So there's a really
because that's Sprague de Camp book, Swords and Sorcery.
Thank you.
And I included that link.
Yeah, that's really worthwhile. If you have a chance to go onto the notes onto the website at Tolkien Scholars, I think it's www.2.tolkienscholars.org. On there's a link for that particular article, so that's worth reading. Because Sprague de Camp, I think, had really this great interest in kind of promoting and publicizing and trying to increase the marketability of fantasy novels, along with other people like Del Rey, I think. And then we talked about the Dark Worlds blog. There was a quote about Leiber and Tolkien, so just a few different sources, kind of comparing these two authors, different, but there's some overlap. And then also a really interesting article, there's a footnote in Myth Lore of Fall/Winter 2017 issue. So there's a link to that. And Ostenar.com had an article about the split between high and low fantasy, and we were, generally speaking, we were kind of agreeing that Leiber would be low fantasy and Tolkien would be high. So Howard, who wrote the Conan series, Howard and Leiber were influenced by Edison and Dunsany, just as Tolkien was. So in a way, you could say that they were cousins, or some kind of indirect relation, in that they drew from similar sources, but they arrived in different places. Peers,
yeah,
exactly.
Cohorts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And then Sarah referred to The Nature of Middle-earth, which was recently published, and I think it was Hostetler is the editor. And the question she was exploring was Tolkien interested in the motivations and desires of his characters or not? Because that was one of the things that when you look at Campbell, you look at some of the fantasy authors, there is definitely more that kind of, and I think we actually referred to this when we were discussing Moorcock a little bit.
Yes.
What does the character, what do they really want? Jung and Campbell reference, they keep coming up. Psychological philosophy, universal themes overlapping with Tolkien, but not necessarily as he put it, trying to figure out the bones in the soup. Other authors of later generations of fantasy, and also we should refer to Arthurian literature and Tolkien. I'm not sure what that reference was, but I think the idea was that we were talking about how that's something we need to come back to at some point and discuss.
Yes.
And then
as one of the topics to cover in the future. Yeah.
We haven't done that for a while.
And Tolkien wrote quite a bit about that, as well as his own.
Yes.
Yeah, we translated Sir Gawain.
So.
Mm-hmm. And that whole idea again of getting at something northern, the northern epicness.
Mm-hmm.
Arthur, that is a great example of that, where if you explore that and we talk about it at some future date, we can kind of talk about the continental romances, their version of Arthur versus a Welsh / English, British version of Arthur.
By the way, Roots and Branches is available on Amazon. There are 12 copies left for $30 right now.
Ooh, get them while they're hot.
Yeah.
Really?
I'm wondering if they've joined Amazon's print on demand thing, because
That would be
that's
so
what
much
I
easier.
have, and that means it won't go out of print unless they decide to pull it.
Which is great because Tom
yeah,
Shippey's
print on
work is
demand
fantastic.
helps so much for out of print stuff.
Yes.
What
Um,
happened? Roots.
So go to
Roots and
smile.amazon.com,
Okay.
and then Tom Shippey Roots and Branches, and you'll find it right away.
And I mean, it's jam-packed full
Only
of essays.
Only 12 left in stock.
We also
12 left in stock.
we talked about how
Well,
to
they say
change
that
it is
just to
to
get you to
appropriate
buy
it to. So if you change Tolkien's northernness in his stories, is to appropriate it and take something away from it, and so there is a danger. I think that was probably a comment referring to the Amazon series. But we should tap into Chaucer's Canterbury Tales
Yes.
as an interesting medieval source that Tolkien refers to in his letters, not as a kind of a credit to this great source, but more of the fact that this is part of what he as a medieval scholar would have known quite well. And then we asked another question: is what about mythology by Bulfinch? We can explore that in the future.
Oh, yeah.
And then does Tolkien talk about Robin Hood? I mean, we have deep questions here at Tolkien
Yeah.
Society. So those are things that we are curious about. And then our next meeting, of course, is today, May 21, 2022. Those are the notes, and I'm sticking by it.
Thank you so much, Supreme Secretary.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
And to
Yes,
Professor
yes.
Hawk.
Please,
Really
please.
appreciate
The
that.
applause may die down.
Yeah.
No, please. That's
Golf
nothing.
clap. Golf clap.
All right. Well, anybody want to check in on any topics before we jump into our main topic of the Inklings and Charles Williams? Check in on.
Sure.
Okay.
I've got in my Slashdot reading, I came across an article posted on the 15th that I think I'm gonna go to the linked article out of the Independent, which indicates that Amazon isn't doing nothing about the comments from diehard fans.
Okay.
That they have been vocally negative, and it appears that Amazon is trying to do a little damage control.
Okay.
So,
Any
diehard
specifics?
diehard Lord of the Rings fans sharing their verdict of the new TV series after being treated to a special preview. Prime Video invited j.r.r. Tolkien enthusiasts to attend a screening of the forthcoming show, which is titled The Lord of the Rings of Power. The new show will run for 8 episodes when it arrives in September.
Who was lucky enough to do
Spin-off.
that?
Let's see.
Torn. Probably.
So,
Torn.
J.D. Payne, Patrick McKay, the Tolkien professor was invited. Dr. Maggie Park was invited.
Who was the first
They
one?
all say that we're in good hands with Amazon's folks as they are creating this content, and they say the Tolkien professor says, above and beyond, I was absolutely blown away. I cannot wait to see more. It's just beyond words. So,
Was this credible, or was this just another way to hype it, because that's what they're doing?
Yeah.
And I said, if it's credible, could this be, I think maybe the fallout from Disney might have played a role here.
Or people were jumping to conclusions from the very little information that was there, because everybody's become so hypersensitive to everything instead of waiting to see.
yeah, and so I think Tolkien was trying to get the word out to certain curated fans.
You mean Amazon? Because I don't think Tolkien's saying much.
No, he's.
Right.
That is a dog.
Nor his estate at this point.
Yeah.
So yes, Amazon is trying to get information out, but only to the select fans who have large followings. So I'm wondering, did the Prancing Pony podcast get invited, etc. And I don't know.
Yeah, the question is, if it's select few, is it people who are aligned with the same views,
Is
As
it
opposed to
the
the
right
right.
select few?
Right,
or
exactly.
is it not?
Was it a diverse selection or was it a narrow selection that they knew would be safe?
Yeah, selection bias.
And I don't know the answer to this
Mhm.
based on the article, but
You
One-
could probably, if you take the list of the people that were there, and then look up their published works, you'd be able to tell pretty quickly where they stand.
well, I mean, the Tolkien professor obviously is one who's widely followed with a large audience of diehard fans.
Right.
So John Howe apparently also has been interviewed this just like 10 days ago, and because he was the concept artist for Amazon Prime Video.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that was also linked in the.
Yeah, but he's not going to say
article.
anything.
Oh, no,
Yeah, he's probably not
on the
gonna-
payroll.
He's always so positive anyway. He's been
Yeah.
so nice. You know, he's let us use his artwork for the Other Minds
Really?
magazine. Yeah,
Wow, that's
because we don't charge anything for the magazine, so as long as you don't charge, it's okay.
great.
Yeah.
Because our magazine is an open source magazine. It's
Other
through,
Minds,
yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure John is positive because he has an NDA saying that he can't be any
Yeah.
other. than
Exactly.
positive.
And also, he is a little, maybe whether it's because he's an artist or not, is a little bit more. You guys were talking about your concerns about woke culture. He's definitely more on that, at least publicly. I don't know him personally,
Interesting.
but he's more publicly on that side. So that wouldn't help you as far as your concerns.
I mean,
about
really,
that.
and he could have, if he wanted to, just have said, "I have no comment." If
Right.
He wanted to be interviewed, but he wanted to be interviewed, so yeah.
Yeah,
So-
but
that
he
still
wouldn't
doesn't really
he wouldn't
tell
help you
us.
as far as your concerns about is he going to be.
I
Yeah.
still believe that a lot of this. I mean, there could be some real concerns here, as there might have been about the Hobbit going into it, where
But
some
we
people
really
said,
don't know.
but we don't know yet. And I
That's
think
been my
that,
argument.
I think that so much of this again is like about who gets to be called the hardcore fan.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, of
The
course, that
canon
the
battle,
people
yeah.
aren't hardcore or anything like that.
It's all nerd rage. It's all nerd rage.
And how much of it, what percentage of it? Because I do
Yeah.
have questions. I will admit, but what percentage of it is straight up book fans
Mhm.
who also like the other
Probably
things
not that many.
versus Peter Jackson
Right.
Yeah.
devotees.
Right.
Yeah, because Chris said that the article said fans of J.r.r. Tolkien didn't specify whether it was Peter Jackson. fan.
They're not gonna
Yeah.
differ. It's not like there's gonna be a research study or anything.
Yeah.
So
But that'd be an interesting question, though.
yeah.
Well-
so I would like to see what the professors, the type of works they publish. You can tell if you read it, just a few of their papers, you'll be able to tell if they're quote unquote woke or not. And then that'll tell you if that was a sticking point for them or not.
Right.
If they're woke academics, which is where most of that quote unquote wokeness comes from,
Right.
then their feedback on that is not going to help you as far as your concerns about is
But
this
if they're
going to be.
not, and
But
they
if they're
say-
not, if they've either been neutral or they've kind of stayed out of it,
Or if they say, I think maybe I wouldn't be too worried yet, then it gives you a little bit more
exactly, yeah.
context.
If historically they're not
Right.
woke writers, then that is
Yeah.
encouraging. So do a little research.
What was the
So-
link, Chris? Just so I can put this in the notes.
Yeah, I'll kind of put my anecdote in.
Okay.
That, Star Trek Discovery came out a little forceful on some
Oh yeah, not a little.
woke culture
Not a
items.
little. It was a lot.
But in season 2, 3, and 4,
They backed off.
toned it down.
Yeah, because they had such backlash.
Because they had such a backlash.
They had like the
And-
tiny viewing audience. That was also
And I
because they
want-
went to a new streaming platform too.
Yeah, and I wonder if Amazon is getting this out in front of normal people,
Yep, we'll
so
see.
that they can do some edit. You know, this is April, May.
Yeah. Still got till
screenings.
September.
And so they've got some time to re-edit and recut some things.
Oh, I
Sure.
see.
Yeah.
In other words, Chris, are you saying that they did this screening so that if the people who were watching it said, "Oh my goodness, this is garbage,"
They could modify it.
they could actually modify it?
Yeah,
Okay, they're testing the waters.
Yeah.
Market
yeah.
research.
And I think that's wise.
And that's a standard process.
Yeah, for movies.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
Well, we hope so. What's the article that you mentioned again, so I can put it in the notes, please?
So it's in the Independent, and it's
It's Gary's dog. It's in the Independent. Okay, I'll just look up.
Lord of the Rings. Tolkien fans share first reviews after being invited to watch the new Prime Video series.
Okay, thanks. Found it.
Well, what's gonna do it is 3.5 months when the show starts airing, and we'll see.
Exactly.
Okay. All right, good to know. Thanks, Chris. Keep us posted.
Yep.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Anybody
thank you.
else got any other comments?
Anything you want to bring up before we dive into the Inklings? Gary?
The only thing I'd say is, people are just, they've had their fill of wokeness, most normal people. And I think it's a losing proposition if Amazon goes in that direction, even though probably the writers and
We'll see.
everybody else involved is in that position, so.
S&P 500 dropped Tesla because of ESG stuff, so
Yeah, ESG is,
yeah.
I mean, they're starting to lose everywhere, including if you
What's
invest.
ESG?
But right now, you invest, everybody's losing, so.
So for those who don't know, ESG is a environmental social governance. It's a social credit score. So in China, you have a social credit score, right? As well as a regular credit card score, like we have credit card score.
Yeah.
ESG is a social credit score, and it's your impact on the environment, your impact on social issues and governance. Are you pro or anti-union? Do you follow, is workplace harassment, things like that. So it is basically woke scoring. And the S&P 500
Hugely
has
invasive.
a division of ESG scoring of the S&P 500, which includes Microsoft and Exxon and others. This week they removed Tesla from the S&P 500, but kept Exxon and Microsoft and Amazon and others.
So how did that affect the stocks?
It's already been chaos anyway.
Because of Elon.
But it's really remarkable because, and so he is politically shifting. He was very, very left. I mean, the whole point of Tesla was supposed to be the environment, but there's been Tesla has had low scores in both environmental because electric cars have a really high environmental impact. A different impact, but a high environmental impact. The social side, it was mostly because of what he's trying to do with Twitter now, but also because there's been some workplace stuff and governance, and that's the big one. The company has been hit on repeatedly. They've had some legitimate issues with workplace safety and other issues, and so all of those have lowered the ESG score. And so, but it's not a coincidence that this has happened right during all the Twitter stuff. And so there's a lot of political stuff going on. Anyway, I want to keep this on Tolkien.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just good.
So,
What would
but
Tolkien
this
think
is
about free
relevant
speech?
to the show because Amazon is on the S&P 500,
Right.
and Amazon is notorious for not being the best workplace, and they've been trying really hard to clean up their image that way. But I have to be careful because I have perpetual NDAs from Amazon because I had the opportunity to work for them, and I've done contracts with them multiple times I have worked directly with Amazon on and off for the last 20 years because of publishing, 22 years, all the way back to Mighty Words when I was CTO. Yeah. We had the top 50 ebooks were our ebooks back then. We were the number one ebook company back then. So we had a very close relationship. And then more recently I did some other, and the part I can share carefully is the management style at Amazon is one of the reasons why I don't want to work there. If it's not in the employee handbook. There's two different handbooks. There's handbooks for employees and handbooks for managers. And the handbook for managers, when I'm a management level, executive level, is and the antithesis of my management style, in that they say assume you are right until they can overwhelmingly prove you wrong, your employees. That is the antithesis of my management style. But so Amazon has gotten a lot of flack for that. So they have increasingly, it affects their stock, it affects their investments. They have stakeholders who care about ESG. They have an ESG listing in the S&P 500. They need the money for all the things they're doing. And so an ESG score matters to them. And so when they release content that can be controversial and could have an impact one way or the other, but we are seeing a split, right? You have how big is the audience that's pro ESG versus the audience that's anti ESG. Most people don't even know what ESG is. So, how much is that a factor? So the backlash is the question. Right now, there, as much as a backlash as those who oppose quote unquote wokeness, being taken to such an extreme, right? I don't think anybody's like against all of it. I think it's just that so much of it's been so extreme, at least from
Right.
hearing everybody.
Right.
It doesn't seem like there's yet enough backlash against wokeness because ESG is growing. It is part of what the United States plans to implement, and we would literally have social. Right now, it's just for businesses. But we would literally have social scores, ESG scores, as individuals. And that would affect your ability to get jobs, be part of clubs, literary
Seriously?
groups. It could exclude you.
Okay,
That's how it works in China.
Yeah,
That's
that's
how it
taken too
works in
far.
other different parts of
I'll have
Europe.
to ask my brother about this because he's in
Yeah,
China.
it's all happening. This is all bureaucratic, plutocratic stuff. And it's, yeah. It's very anti-American, if you will. But yeah, it's your social credit score versus, and you already know how much your credit score, like it's hard to get a job now because employers automatically often check your credit score.
Oh, yeah.
Just imagine how it is with your social score. So what you post on social media, HR already searches all of that with software. If they can just look up a score, they're just going to do that. It's going to save them time and money. And so if you're on a different political bent, that's going to really impact not only, and so related to this, what we do here, literally groups will exclude you from them if your ESG score isn't sufficient. So you would not be able to join certain literary and other activity groups.
Okay, that's going
things
way
like
too far
that.
right there.
It isn't there yet.
Yeah.
Right now, it's just at the business level. But all of the Green New Deal and everything, the Green New Deal would implement ESGs for everybody. All businesses at first, but it would eventually roll into people as well. So, all right. So we got to kind of tie this into Tolkien. If we're going to bring this in, we have to tie it into Tolkien. Tolkien, you can read my paper on Tolkien, his love of trees and the environment. Tolkien would love people to be more considerate of the environment.
Yeah.
We know how he felt about the infernal combustion engine. So not all of it's totally inappropriate for a Tolkien-esque. Like if there's stuff in the Amazon thing that's very pro-environment, that's going to be appropriate for a Tolkien-esque setting and his writings and how Tolkien felt about the environment.
Yeah.
So in the E part of that, as much as it may irk some people who are like, nah, everybody's overreacting with the environment, that's not necessarily un-Tolkien canon. So that's just something to keep that in mind. Yes.
How radical was he? Because I don't know. I do know at the time, prior to World War II, there were movements. There was a movement in England, and I forget what they call themselves, but basically, back to nature. And I think the Germans had something like that too.
Yeah, he wasn't radical, but he was extreme in his belief, if that makes sense. He wasn't like actively, it wasn't like part of ELF or something like the Environmental Liberation Front.
Yeah.
He wasn't an environmental terrorist. He was much more of a conformist than that. But so if you look up Tolkien, his love of trees, I read a whole paper on this, and it was read at the Tolkien Society back in, I think, 2011 or something.
Oh.
I explain Tolkien's love of the environment and trees fairly well, I believe.
I'm sure you did.
So, again, I don't think, and again, I hate to put words in Tolkien's mouth, I don't think he would have an issue with anything that's pro-environment protection, but at the same time, not stuff at the cost of society, right? I do think because he comes from the late 1800s, there's still a little bit of that idea of mankind and the environment. Nature is there to serve all of that, manifest destiny, all those things. So it would be a little bit mitigated by that.
And
But he was very,
against-
very...
He was also against the urbanization of.
Right. Well, because of his time in the heavy industrial area,
Well, let's just
Yeah.
say
he was scarred by
we
that.
have to be careful not to use a 20th century
Yeah.
grid on it because he was pro-agriculture.
Yes.
He was
Right.
less inclined towards a
heavy in industry.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
And heavy
So,
urban
so it wasn't
density.
development he was against. He was against the rapid
The
machinization.
plundering of the resources, though,
Yeah.
and actually,
and the ruination of the landscape.
and also by subsidiarity, he believed that local control tended to be better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's more of a conservative.
That's the governance
concept.
side.
Yeah, governance. Like if you have some
Yeah.
people somewhere far away making decisions.
Right.
Like-
Well, he wrote about that because of what he experienced in World War One.
Sure.
These remote generals were ordering people to their death, and they weren't there in the trenches and
So-
couldn't relate. Exactly. So it's complicated.
Right.
So Amazon has to walk that fine line because ultimately the whole point is they got to have enough viewers to make the money because they have invested a huge fortune in this. They've taken a big risk doing it up front.
Yep.
And they have to find a way to placate as many the widest audience possible to make sure this is a success, right? Because if it gets boycotted by one side or the other, it's gonna hurt them,
Right.
because they took a big risk on this one.
Right.
By the way, Amazon has been cutting back heavily on, and Netflix as well, on a lot of movies and cartoons because it's gotten too political. So
Really?
realize if you like the content that's coming out at Amazon, Netflix, etc., or you don't like it, realize that you in the aggregate you do have an impact, and basically the companies will just start to go safe. And this is part of why you end up with very uninteresting content in the majority of the time, is because if it's controversial, and in our current 10 years of everybody overreacting to everything, companies go, okay, fine, we'll just play it safe, and so you don't get interesting content. So it will be interesting to see what they have done with the Silmarillion, because there's so many ways that could go. But I really think, other than what we can get leaked, we're spending an awful lot of CPU cycles on something that we haven't really seen. I would definitely encourage anybody who wants to research what those professors, what their writing style is, and that will probably give you a good idea of what's coming. If they're really supportive and they're very woke, then that's a warning. If they're more neutral, then that's, maybe it's more balanced than people. Maybe people have only fixated on the little things because of their own biases. So let's yeah. If we can move on from
I have
that.
an interesting segue.
Okay.
And that is that the Lord of the Rings in its time was considered by some to be juvenile.
Yes.
And-
Even Tolkien was nervous about that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Will it be taken seriously?
Yeah.
Will it be received seriously? And so, in terms of how things are received,
Mhm.
and by the audience that one intends to write to, and I think that one of the as we kind of transition to talking about Tolkien and his contemporaries, his peers, I would love for us by the end of today, or maybe just by the end of this month, to have generated like a graphic. I know Prancing Pony Podcast, these guys do a good job sometimes with their famous, like they have this one famous graphic that shows wargs and wolves and how do these overlap and relate. And I was thinking about how it would be nice to have like the circles in which Tolkien knew people, and you have the Inklings, but that's only one circle.
Yeah.
And then you've got like W.H. Auden, who was not in the Inklings, but he was one of those who actually, as a serious author, he gave a favorable review to the Lord of the Rings, specifically to the Return of the King, and it was his review in the 1950s that made Lord of the Rings more acceptable mainstream. Whereas we know, for example, that it was already being really taken up by
C.S.
Pete
Lewis's
Nixon.
little piece.
Yeah, you got.
Yeah.
I was referring to W.H. Auden.
Oh, okay.
So there's the Inkling circle, but then there's this broader like circle in which Tolkien knew people like W.H. Auden and others who were writers at the time. So I think it's interesting. Maybe by the end of today or at some point soon in the future, we can kind of create a graphic that would be helpful, where we could see here's Tolkien. He's part of this ring called the Inklings
ring.
But then but then there's these other circles
Okay.
as well.
Yeah.
That would be very interesting.
I'd like us to just be
kind of a
really
Venn
open today.
diagram of
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we need to be open today to like, okay, so who are all the people that Tolkien
right.
knows? Because we know that
That'd
his
be cool.
relationship with C.S. Lewis was really pivotal,
Yeah.
but there's so many other people.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
so let's keep an open mind today, and if you find any reference to others who had some kind of relationship that was a professional relationship, or authors who knew him, I'm going to be making a list of those, because I'd like to make something that would be helping us to kind of reflect on that.
Cool.
So, yeah.
I would like to start, if I may, the Inklings piece, unless you had something more specific in mind. I want to read the first paragraph from chapter 1, which is just kind of a high level of the Inklings, very high level, and then jump to 10, which is the Charles Williams piece, if I may.
Yeah, let me just put this up here so I have it. So now the Inklings, and you're specifically reading from...
The beginning of chapter 1 and the beginning of chapter 10.
This is by whom?
Well, this is from the Inklings, the Fellowship, the Literary Lives of the Inklings.
And who is the...
Philip Zaleski and Carol Zaleski. Philip and Carol Zaleski.
Okay. Wow, you both got...
Yep.
Is this
Yeah,
the
I've
same
had this
book,
one
Chris?
for years.
Chris Cooperstein, is that the same one that you picked up?
Yes, it was. And I have a selection from chapter 12.
And I'll actually read
you
the-
are complete.
Inlet as well.
Okay.
Cool.
Go ahead. Thanks,
So I'll start with the sleeve and then jump to that, and then we can discuss as we go, and then go deeper as we need to. So this is from the insert. C.S. Lewis is the 20th century's most widely read Christian writer, and J.r.r. Tolkien its most beloved mythmaker. For 3 decades, they and their closest associates formed a literary club known as the Inklings, which met every week in Lewis's Oxford rooms and in nearby pubs. They discussed literature, religion, and ideas, read aloud from works in progress, took philosophical rambles through woods and fields, gave one another... What's that?
Here, here.
Here, here.
Philosophical rambles through woods.
Yeah, that's what we're doing.
Gave one another companionship and criticism, and in the process rewrote the cultural history of their times.
Yes.
In The Fellowship, Philip Zaleski and Carol Zaleski offer the first complete rendering of the Inklings' lives and works. And the result is an extraordinary account of the ideas, affections, and vexations that drove the group's most significant members. C.S. Lewis accepts Jesus Christ while riding in the sidecar of his brother's motorcycle, maps the medieval and Renaissance minds, becomes a world-famous evangelist and moral satirist, and creates new forms of religiously attuned fiction while wrestling with personal crises. J.r.r. Tolkien transmutes an invented mythology into gripping story in The Lord of the Rings while conducting groundbreaking Old English scholarship and elucidating, for family and friends, the Catholic teachings at the heart of his vision. That part, that's where we get into the clear biases, right?
Yeah.
In their perspective. Owen Barfield, a philosopher for whom language is the key to all mysteries, becomes Lewis's favorite sparring partner, and for a time Saul Bellow's chosen guru.
Oh, hold on.
Yeah,
Okay.
didn't know that about Saul Bellow.
Okay, so we've got
Owen Barfield,
Owen Barfield.
Lewis's favorite sparring partner,
Uh-huh.
and Saul Bellow's chosen guru.
Okay.
Interesting.
Who's Saul Bellow?
Another author of various, I've read some of his stuff back in the 80s.
He was famous in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
Oh, that's...
And Charles Williams, who we're going to cover today, poet, author of Supernatural Shockers, and strange acolyte of romantic love, turns his everyday life into a mystical pageant. Romantics who scorned rebellion, fantasists who prized reality, wartime writers who believed in hope, Christians with cosmic reach, the Inklings sought to revitalize literature and faith in the 20th century's darkest years, and did so in dazzling style. So that's their little insert there. Well, I think that's a nice little teaser.
It is.
It also shows the clear bias of the book,
Yeah.
right? From a very religious perspective there,
Yeah.
clearly that's going to be part of the focus.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind, just for what it's worth. All right, chapter 1, I kind of skipped the preface and such. A star shines on the hour of our meeting.
Mm-hmm.
The story of the Inklings might begin with any of the company. Charles Williams, the first to be born, the first to publish, the first to die. Clive Staples Lewis, the most celebrated and execrated. Owen Barfield, the least known, but some say the most profound. Or any of the other brilliant figures who joined, reveled in, and sometimes quit the fellowship. in the book, they start with John Ronald Reuel Tolkien. For with Tolkien, the Inklings constellation began its ascent into the English literary firmament. He was the first to create work that bears the group's special stamp of Christian faith blended with pagan beauty, of fantastic stories grounded in moral realism. And we start our portrait of Tolkien with his mother, a welcome surprise in this tale of a group that rigorously excluded women. So, again, we're getting some very clear opinions right up front about their perspective on this. Because Mabel Tolkien set in motion her son's madly spinning top of a mind, from which epic poems, children's stories, fantasy novels, invented languages, literary essays, philological studies, songs, watercolors, and pen and ink sketches would take flight for the next 80 years.
It's true, he did give credit to his mother for her interest in words.
Yes, clearly. So I'm not going to read that part. I thought these were really good excerpts of the flavor of this book.
Yeah.
And, where it's going to go from there. And then, of course, everybody else can read more detail. Any comments on that before I jump to number 10? Chapter 10.
Yeah, one quick one.
Please.
It's not me taking issue with the book per se, because I think, generally speaking, I probably would find lots to enjoy. And
Right.
I probably should own this copy.
Yeah.
But there's different ways of looking at the Inklings. And I want to suggest one way to look at it as not so much kind of how they set out of here's this luminary Tolkien, and then it's kind of gathered around him. But I see, again, with all these different kind of, you're not necessarily exclusively in one group or the other.
Mm-hmm.
I see from Tolkien's own words, I can't remember what my source is, but it seems like he said that Lewis was the magnetizing influence that drew people into the Inklings, and that doesn't mean that it was centered around Lewis, because I think Lewis didn't want it centered around Lewis. He really enjoyed the friendship piece.
But he may have facilitated those connections.
I think that's what I see, and I want to just ask what everybody else thinks about that. Like, do we see it as just like a lot of people? I think Tolkien is the most famous member of that group.
Yeah, for sure.
But that doesn't necessarily, at least in my opinion, doesn't mean that the Inklings was, in a sense, produced by him. I think he brought something out in them that they wouldn't have had otherwise.
Mm-hmm. And vice versa.
But so I think that Lewis was the organizing kind of principle, because he seemed to be better at like making friends and drawing people in, whereas Tolkien, I think, was maybe the better writer. But
And Tolkien was more in his own head.
right,
And not a very good, did not speak because of his rambling, rapid style.
Yeah, I listened to it this morning. And
Did you?
yeah.
Can you imagine having to take classes with this
Oh,
guy?
man.
Yeah.
With him rambling off in different tangents, stream of consciousness and stuff.
Yeah, but he did begin all of his classes with
What? Yes.
That would have been yes.
We had quoting from Beowulf.
Yes.
Yes.
Which apparently was one of the better things that he, like,
Right.
W.H. Auden really appreciated.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
he-
That part was fun.
yes,
The rest could be quite painful. Didn't have the luxury of like setting up a tape recorder to try to go back and figure out what did he say? I've had professors like that, and I'm very sympathetic to that.
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, so what do you think, Gary and Chris? I mean, what do you know about the Inklings, and do you think that Tolkien is kind of like what keeps them going, or is it Lewis?
Well, chapter 12 seems to indicate that it might be Williams, at least during the war.
Okay, well, we'll have to come back to that. And
Yeah, and the book is broken into different periods: pre-war, during war,
Right,
post-war, things like that too. So.
all right, Hawk, why don't you read a little bit from chapter 10, and,
Yep.
then Chris can tease us with something
Yeah.
from chapter 12.
Yeah. Number 10, Romantic Theology. Charles Williams was not like the other Inklings. Lewis and Tolkien were solid, jocular, beef and potatoes men, and even Barfield, for all his dancing and esoteric fights, was practical and predictable, at home, if not fulfilled, in law and real estate. Williams was a will-o'-the-wisp, a figure glimpsed in a fever dream. To attempt his portrait is to paint on air. Quote, Williams! How many people have tried to describe this extraordinary man and how his essence escapes them? End quote. Thus, John Wayne, not the actor, W-A-I-N.
Yeah, no.
Not the one called the Pilgrims.
The Duke.
who knew him well, or Lewis, an intimate friend, quote, "No man whom I have known was at the same time less affected and more flamboyant in his manners. The thing is very difficult to describe," end
Thing?
quote. Or T.S. Eliot, quote, "I think he was a man of unusual genius, and I regard his work as important, but it has an importance of a kind not easy to describe," end quote. Three of the more articulate men of the century tongue-tied when it comes to Williams. How can this be? A few answers come to mind. Above all, Williams was a swirling mass of contradictions. He wrote shockers that failed to shock. He worshipped women, but, quote, "liked to beat them with a ruler," end quote. He was a faithful husband with a harem of besotted acolytes. He was orthodox but heretical, a devout Anglican who practiced magic. He had a face at once hideous and beautiful. Lewis, quote, "His face we thought ugly. I am not sure that the word monkey has not been murmured in this context. But the moment he spoke, it became, as was also said, like the face of an angel," end quote. Quote, "This double-sidedness," and Lewis believed, "was the most strongly developed character of his mind. He might have appropriated Kipling's thanks to Allah who gave me two, TWO, separate sides to my head. Except that he would have had to omit the word separate. In Williams, the two sides lived in a perpetual dance or lover's quarrel of mutual mockery," end quote. Let's see. In addition, Williams liked or felt compelled to construct imaginary persona for himself and those around him. He called himself Taliesin, after the 6th century Welsh bard. Or Taliesin, I forget how that's pronounced.
Taliesin.
Taliesin.
His wife, Florence, he renamed Michal, after King Saul's daughter and King David's first wife. Among his female admirers and platonic lovers, he transformed Phyllis Jones into Philida and Celia, Lois Longsims into Lalage, or Lalage, I don't know. And he referred to his distinguished superior at Oxford University Press, Sir Humphrey Milford, as Caesar.
No, please.
Indeed, once he joined OUP, it wasn't long before he had turned that booming international firm into a province of his own imperial imagination, Oxford University Press.
Yep.
Away from work, his friends were more than friends. They and he formed a mystical community, the, quote, "companions of the co-inheritance," end quote. A key Williamsian idea, co-inheritance is the mutual relatedness of all beings. We exist not as isolated monads, but in and through one another.
like that.
Co-inherence, I think is how it's pronounced.
Co-inherence.
Co-inherence.
Inherence, okay.
Sorry.
That's fine. For Williams, who adored Shakespeare, the world was indeed a stage, an occasion for role-playing, for theater, and for the highest form of theater, which is religious ritual. He was nothing if not a ritualist, said Lewis. He would make sacred signs, such as the sign of the cross, over his followers as they rode the London Underground. He had a taste for sadomasochistic rituals as well. Ordinary life, the dull daily routines of marriage, of office work, of an evening's amusement, all this bored him, even filled him with horror. Everyone and everything with Williams needed to be raised to its highest level. The teacher must become a mage, the husband a knight-errant, the laborer a hero as a sacred drama, intensified, reified, baptized in the turbulent waters of his restlessness, curiosity, and ardor. At his best, he could almost raise the dead. Dylan Thomas once said to him, quote, why you come into the room and talk about Keats and Blake as if they were alive, end quote.
Well, that's high praise.
This impression he gave of electric animation, of a bundle of raw nerves in a business suit, spewing ideas, images, observations in all directions, appears in many accounts of Williams. Typical is that of Theodore Maynard, a poetry reviewer for the North American Review, who visited him in London in 1919 and discovered a man, quote, trembling with nervousness, end quote. and chattering away with, quote, staccato eagerness, end quote. Eliot, who knew Williams and admired him, watched him lecture and saw the same thing. Quote, he was never still. He writhed and swayed. He jingled coins in his pocket. He sat on the edge of the table swinging his leg. In a torrent of speech, he appeared to be saying whatever came into his head from one moment to the next, end quote. He smoked heavily, walked quickly, zigzagged from one friendship to another. He was monkey, elf, jackdaw rolled into one. I'll stop there for the moment because that's a lot to process.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Off to an interesting start.
yeah, have any of you read Charles Williams?
No, I've had one of his books in my bookcase for like forever, and I've never read it before. But I know that it was Williams' influence on Lewis in the science fiction trilogy. This is Paralandra.
Oh, from
So Out of the Silent Planet,
Yeah.
Paralandra, and Hideous Strength.
Okay.
There is, I don't want to give any spoilers, but I'll just give this hint that there is a reference at the end of Paralandra to King Arthur, and then it gets even deeper in that Hideous Strength, and it's the only time that Lewis really dabbles with the Arthurian Merlin kind of legend, and he somewhere says that it was because of William's influence on him, and of course Taliesin. I mean, we've talked about Stephen Lawhead before, the author who kind of includes Taliesin in the Arthurian kind of Taliesin, and then you have Merlin and Arthur. Anyway, Cooperstein, you had a comment.
Oh, I'm just looking at his list of books, and he didn't write a ton of books. He wrote a ton of plays
Oh.
and a ton of poetry,
Mm-hmm.
and so
Poet and playwright more than regular
he
author.
was a playwright,
Okay.
and I think he was playing with being the next Shakespeare, being kind of Shakespeare reborn seems to be a bit of his style.
I mean,
Which,
he died
if you
young.
know Shakespeare, he likes to take Christian themes and put them into
Unusual,
Pagan settings, yeah.
unusual,
Midsummer Night's Dream.
unfamiliar.
Situations that have lots of shock and awe in them. And so I'm not surprised to hear that Williams was trying to be shock and awe and wasn't.
Yeah, so there's it just shows again a very big difference between each of these members, right? They're all friends, but like we were saying, Tolkien's like in his headspace, he's probably like
Even
sitting
in the
there drinking
interviews,
his beer,
you look
thinking
at the
about,
interviews, and he's really just in his own head.
oh yeah, like he's thinking about yes, but what about that conjugation of the Elvish word? It means so much.
Yes.
And Lewis, he's talking loudly, and and he's just enjoying everybody being there, and Williams is kind of weird. I don't know.
Well, and I think this is we're going to tie in role playing gaming here.
Yeah. Yay.
Shocker.
Yeah.
This is one of my arguments. So the trope of role playing game stats established by Dungeons and Dragons is 6 stats: strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, constitution, and charisma.
Yeah.
And I always argued, no, you need a minimum of 7 because charisma and appearance are 2 very different things.
Yes.
And in the late 80s, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition came out with the Unearthed Arcana, which brought from Dragon Magazine the concept, the stat of comeliness, which is appearance.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And so they just added another stat, and I have incorporated that into all of my role-playing games if they don't already include that, because it's just unavoidable that your physical appearance, attractiveness, can be completely different than your charisma. And this sounds like somebody who has a horrifically low appearance, but the moment he spoke, his charisma overrode that. So you could argue in game stats of D&D, he may have had a 3 appearance, but an 18 charisma.
Yeah.
And that would create that weird dichotomy. And everybody, if you've been around people at all, you've run into people like that where in either direction. It goes both ways. So when I was a photographer for modeling agencies for a number of years, and so I got to see the reverse of this a lot, where absolutely gorgeous men and women, but then the moment they opened their mouths, they were ugly people.
Yeah.
And so they were the opposite: 18 appearance, 3 charisma, right? And they just did not look as attractive. And I would see. Once I spoke to them and I'm doing a photo shoot, I was trying to hide their charisma from showing up in their photos. So a lot of times I'd get people laughing and talking with me during the photo shoots to get them, because sometimes it might boost their appearance a little bit to be friendlier. It's somebody who, like, they look more beautiful when they're smiling or something like that, right? For these people, it was better to not engage them as much and just focus on the positioning, because if I was engaging them and talking, it made them less attractive to the lens. And vice versa, for people who were less attractive and want to go into acting as character actors,
Right.
it was more important that I got them to bring out that charisma
Right.
through the lens.
Right.
So anyway, I think this is the best example I've heard of in a long time
Yeah.
of the difference between appearance and charisma.
Because you don't see, really, I mean, they all had their followers, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you don't see people talking to Tolkien and being his little harem followers.
Yeah, no, I'm like, whoa.
Whoa, that's like.
Sounds like
Well, no, I don't
yeah.
think necessarily it was referring to sexual.
No, they
itself,
said
but-
platonic. They were platonic followers.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's got a fan base.
right. Yeah, yeah. He's early,
Whereas
early
Tolkien's like,
fandom. Yeah.
Tolkien's like people like calling him at bad
like,
hours.
"Quit bothering
knocking
me."
his door, go
He
away!
took his name off the phone book.
Curmudgeonly.
Get off my lawn!
Mr. Curmudgeon.
yeah. I mean, Lewis, I think was kind of in the middle, probably,
Yeah.
where he enjoyed
To a certain
to
amount.
a certain amount.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Do any of us really want fame? I mean, that's the question.
Yeah.
I know.
Well, there are many who want fame without realizing the full consequence. They want the perks without the deficits.
Yeah.
And it's like anything
It's like
else.
having their cake and eating it too.
Exactly. Exactly. So.
Okay. Well, that was very helpful. Chris or Gary, yeah. Comments?
The only thing is, I think Williams kept the Inklings from getting bored. And I suspect he was I'm joking here, but he might have been the original creator of the Society for the Advancement of the Society for the Advancement of Creative Anachronism.
Oh.
What about the SCA?
We're
Yeah, you guys probably know more about it.
Yeah, I know the SCA well.
Let's see, because they for a time over in Okinawa they had a chapter, and
Yeah, they have millions of members.
people were interesting in their own rights, okay, and then they all seemed to come together during this medieval thing. And,
Mm-hmm.
I think they had a hell of a good time,
Yes.
but mutually supported, so it had a synergistic effect about.
that's where he's going. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Society for Creative Anachronism?
SCA, you've never heard of the SCA?
No.
Oh, okay. They've been around, I don't know, 60 years or so. They are offended if you lump them together with LARPing, live action role playing. They're like, we are not a LARP, we are a reenactment group. So the original version of it is basically you go to the park or you go to remote camping if it's a big event, but they have fighter practice every week, and you dress up in armor and beat on each other with padded rattan weapons pretty intensely. There are occasional deaths because it's hard. It's moderately hard combat. It's not steel combat like the Polish knights and stuff that you do those tourneys. Go look up these Eastern European steel tournaments where they are in full plate mail and beat on each other. It's amazing. They're not that hardcore.
Hard.
But it's pretty hard. But it's because it's rattan weapons. And anyway, there's fighter practice, but there's everybody else. So I did fighter practice, but I also was a minstrel and I was a cook, and we would have feasts. And there's all these medieval kingdoms all over the world. There's millions of members worldwide.
Sorry, I have to cut to Monty
Yeah.
Python. I always wanted to be a minstrel. No! Be quiet. Stop the music, stop the music.
And that one fell into the swamp, yes. But it is for people who just kind of want to relive kind of the romanticism of a medieval era.
Yeah.
And it's not just medieval. It can be Renaissance. There's a little bit of,
Ancient
and
Roman
then
agreement.
there's also offshoots that show up as well who want to do more Japanese feudal, feudal Japan and stuff
Nice.
like that. For those who don't want to wear heavy armor and want to do Ijitsu type draws and things like that. So, but yeah, it's meant to be a reenactment group, kind of like the Civil War reenactment groups.
Yeah.
Right? Except that the SCA stuff is less staged. Like Civil War reenactments, they literally will reenact battles,
Yeah.
and people come and watch the reenactments of the battles, and you'll have somebody, and in this battle, the general such and such, right? That's a full reenactment group. And then LARP is, you have a character that you create and has stats, and it develops, and it might be soft combat, hard combat, whatever, but it's very much a role-playing thing, except you're physically acting out rather than sitting around a table.
Right.
SCA is kind of in the middle of the two, because you do create a persona. You create an SCA persona, and you can work your way up and get your white belt and become a knight. You can work your up to barony and all these things, and
Nice.
so and the world is all divvied up. The map is different. The SCA map has different kingdoms than the countries, right? So we're in the barony of Wieldsmere here and such, and
Wieldsmere?
it's completely different than the map of the United States.
So have you done this?
I've been involved with SCA on and off since the late '80s. So the most active group I participated with was back in Utah. They had a really good active group there. Here in Spokane, it's kind of hit or miss. The Coeur d'Alene Post Falls group's more active. I don't get over there often enough. The really cool stuff is you go on their weekend events. So they have their battles. They have their wars each year where all the kingdoms come together, and it helps redefine the boundaries, which troops win. And but it's really also an excuse to have a 3-day party. Because you go out, you fight in the field, you do all the supply chain, and then at night, and you bring everybody's got, real mead and everything that they've made themselves in the tents, and everybody just parties hardy each night, and then goes back to the field in the daytime, and you have 2 or 3 days of a lot of fun. Revelry, yes. It's just to have fun, right? That's ultimately what it is.
Oh, look this up.
It's a good way if you do fighter practice to get exercise. If that's not your thing, there's all the others. You have dance groups that meet each week and do medieval dances. You have the minstrels who do the medieval music. You just any interest that kind of is, again, the whole point is anachronism, right? It's out of time. You've taken it out of time.
Exactly.
And so sca.org is the website. And you can show up for free. You don't have to have a membership to participate initially. I never actually paid as a member. I donated and I contributed, but I never actually joined officially as a member. And I participated for years.
I think Chris had a chapter 12 reference.
Yes, please.
Yes, let's go back to that.
So anyway, that's what SCA is.
So the chapter 12 reference, I start a page in, and this is during the war, and the previous page talks about all the children and women and those
What page number is it?
old people. 266. Move out of the city, and so I'll start here. In the midst of this transformation, the Inklings thrived. War famously induces in those far from carnage, at least for a time, a giddy excitement, a sense of living in suspension, betwixt and between, plucked by the hand of history from the suffocating confines of ordinary life. So it was for many of the Oxford intelligentsia. Lewis, describing to Warney a Thursday night meeting in November, wrote that I had never in my life seen Dyson so exuberant, a roaring cataract of nonsense. After dining at the Eastgate Hotel, the troupe returned to Lewis's rooms at Magdalen to hear from a chapter from the new Hobbit, a nativity play by Williams. Unusually intelligible for him and approved by all, and a portion of Lewis's The Problem of Pain. This was the usual fare. At nearly every meeting of the band, as the readings ventured into new territory, Lewis's apologetics, Williams' study of Dante, medical treatises by Harvard, the humor delighted, the conversation sparkled, and the beer flowed freely. Hear, hear. The exhilaration of these wartime gatherings was due in large measure to Williams. Cast up on Oxford shores, he had become a regular on Thursday nights and instantly impressed his hectic personality upon these groups. He declaimed long passages from his plays, novels, and essays. He speculated, challenged, joked, always in motion, a whirling dervish in mind and body. Lewis started to think along Williamesque lines, acquiring a fascination for Arthurian myth and weighing the possibility of using Earth rather than outer space as a stage for fantasy fiction. These twin interests would culminate in his 1945 fantasy that hid his strength. And I'll stop there for comment, and then there's another section.
Well, what do the rest of you think about that?
It's interesting that Tolkien read drafts of The Hobbit. He has a work in progress. That kind of stood out to me.
Well, the Hobbit came out in 1937, right?
Yeah, but Tolkien worked on it, I think, at least according to John D. Rateliff, who is a Tolkien scholar. He wrote the history of
And
The Hobbit.
he was at our Tolkien Moot MERPCon 4, 2009. He was here with Michael Martinez, both of them talking back and forth.
Yeah, I think
That was
Tolkien wrote
great.
The Hobbit in like the early 30s, late 20s, early 30s. Initially, it's just a children's story for his
Right,
kids.
right.
But
Mm-hmm.
So he was updating it, then? I'm just kind of confused.
it was like a rough, it was just a rough draft, wasn't it?
Yeah, but this was during wartime, during World War II.
Oh, it was?
Yes, but World War II for the UK was a lot earlier. So this is
Oh,
like
that would have been
1939.
Yeah.
Oh, the new Hobbit. Oh, maybe he's referring to, maybe the author's referring to The Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit sequel. Because Tolkien started The Lord of the Rings right after.
The Hobbit was the 30s. Lord of the Rings took him 13 years.
Yeah. And Tolkien started The Hobbit Lord of the Rings, 1937.
Right.
38. Yeah, so this must be The Lord of the Rings then. Sorry.
Or it could be his revisions to The Hobbit, because
that's
he did
true.
have to do some revising.
That's true, and pretty significant ones as he was doing to make the Lord of the Rings fit,
Yeah, like the Riddles in the Dark.
because he
chapter.
wasn't allowed to do the Silmarillion.
Yeah. Wasn't. Yeah. Yep.
So I think it was interesting to think that the exhilaration of the wartime gatherings was due in large measure to Williams, meaning that Williams brought a bunch of the excitement to the mundaneness of being, I guess, in a university island during a period of war,
Right.
where the newspaper doesn't have an entertainment or literary or play section during a time of war.
I got a couple questions. One that I don't know if you can answer, Chris, is as the war dragged on. Well, first of all, was Williams ever in the Great War in World War One? Like Tolkien was, and Tolkien suffered quite a bit.
He's the oldest.
Right. So was he too old?
I don't know. I mean, they were desperate for cannon fodder.
Because he was born in 1886.
1886. He would have been, might have been too old.
He might have been too old.
Yeah, so 14, started in another 1428. Unless he volunteered, apparently he didn't, if he did or not. But the other thing is, as the war dragged on, because, you know, we got 39 to, for England anyway, 39 to 45, 6 years. I wonder if their meetings were as, I don't know, jovial or exciting about the whole thing, or what?
Well, and there was a lot of in and out. Tolkien had to go work for the War Department away for a little bit, if I recall. Right?
Okay, here's the answer to that. Let's see. However, it was that most glorious of beings poet Sir Walter Alexander Raleigh, professor of poetry at Oxford, declared the Silver Stare to be real poetry. Chesterton showed more restraint and it may be better judgment. When Williams sent a copy to him, he failed to respond. No matter, neither neglect nor rejection could stop Williams's pen. His brain was teeming with new poems. He published 2 more volumes, poems of conformity and divorce. In the next 8 years, not a bad rate of production, considering the catastrophic interruption of World War I. His poor eyesight and hand tremors excluded him from active service. But while Tolkien and Lewis trudged through the French mud, Williams did much the same on British soil, joining the St. Albans Volunteers and cutting trenches and building earthworks in London's Hyde Park against the invasion that never came. In 1917, after 9 years of dithering, war and financial worries had slowed the pace of romance. He and Florence married, taking a flat in north-central London. Now he must put into practice all his fine poetic thoughts about romantic love, and to all accounts he did so successfully, at least for a time. There's a lot more, but that at least answers the World War I part.
There is something I have found as well, and again, this may be biased, but this is an article from firstthings.com talking about Williams and his place in the Inklings. But it says that it refers to Greville Lindop's biography of Charles Williams and says that Williams went to Oxford when war broke out and became friends with the famous circle around C.S. Lewis. But he was not an Inkling in spirit. He was not at home in Oxford, and his arrival, far from consolidating the Inklings, actually broke them up by bewitching Lewis and making Lewis neglect the central friendship of his life, that with Tolkien. Another scholar of Old English literature, C.L. Wren, said that meeting Williams made you realize why inquisitors thought they had the right to burn people. Tolkien agreed. Williams is eminently combustible. However,
Go ahead.
one more thing. Williams' books had an influence on the Inklings. Lindop is right to say that the central plot line of Many Dimensions suggests the story of the Lord of the Rings. In the Williams novel, it is a stone of great power rather than a ring, but it has the same effect on those who bear it. They become its possession, not its possessor. Chris?
Yeah, so that leads into the section about Tolkien and Williams in the book. This is page 268. More significant and perplexing were Tolkien's reservations about Charles Williams. His response to Williams seemed inversely keyed to Lewis's. The more Lewis admired Williams, the more Tolkien demurred. Some scholars have put his disaffection down to plain jealousy of the man, who displaced him as Lewis's best friend. There is the truth to this. By 1939, Lewis had absorbed most of Tolkien's ideas and literary motifs and was ready to be dazzled by someone new. In a letter he would write to his former pupil, Mary Nyland, shortly after Williams' death, Lewis refers to him as my great friend Charles Williams, my friend of friends, the comforter of all our little set, the most angelic. Small wonder that the sensitive Tolkien felt elbowed aside. Nonetheless, Tolkien enjoyed Williams' company and valued his critical acumen. During the war, he wrote a poem that reveals, if not his deepest feelings about Williams, at least that he was willing to express, at least those he was willing to express. In it, he calls Williams Dear Charles and lauds his subtle mind, his virtues, and his wisdom. He and Williams drank together went on midnight strolls together, regaled one another at Inklings gatherings, Tolkien went out of his way to help Williams lecture at the university and most tellingly loaned him portions of the Hobbit sequel while still in manuscript.
Wow.
Williams immediately put his finger on one great strength of the tale, the bucolic peace of the Shire in contrast to the wrenching horrors of war. But mutual affability notwithstanding, Tolkien disdained Williams' literary works, declaring in 1965 that he found them wholly alien and sometimes very distasteful, occasionally ridiculous. Whence the antipathy. Distrusting Williams' penchant for magic, he may have suspected correctly that behind those plot devices lay personal occult experience kept strictly hidden from the Inklings. It is easy to understand why, when Lewis wrote in the 1947 Fett Schrift essays presented to Charles Williams that he gave to every circle the whole man, Tolkien scribbled in the margin of his personal copy, "No, I think not."
Yeah.
So,
Like most groups of
definitely,
friends.
love-hate relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
Williams seems kind of an all-ball. He was into the occult.
Yeah, but I think he in a different way than people would be nowadays.
Not necessarily as believing, as just playing around with.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Curious interest, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but more intense in his interest than others might be.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
On that spectrum.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, these are all interesting people. I mean, we can at least say that.
Indeed.
And I think again, what inspires an author to write something? You know, I've always thought, oh, there's a great work of fiction in me. Now I'm 40, almost 49. I'm like, nah, I don't think so. But I have great ideas. Those may or may not get their way into a novel.
Mm-hmm.
It may be a role-playing module.
Mm-hmm.
It may be a poem. It may be...
Well, nowadays you have a lot of media
Yeah.
that you
Yeah.
can release through. I mean, his being poetry and theater.
Exactly.
More than
Yeah, or
books.
you can write short stories.
I would
Yeah.
like to read his plays and see if they're better than his books. Because,
Right, yeah.
maybe they are.
Yeah.
I don't know that every play writes a great novelist.
No.
You know?
And then of course, just because you write the play, actually putting it up on stage, there's a lot in between in that execution.
There is.
So-
I think Shakespeare, for example, I mean, obviously they're different people here, but Shakespeare, I find reading his plays
Not so interesting.
not so
No,
interesting.
you need the action.
You do.
And such. Yeah.
Right, and
you need
I
the
mean-
staging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really makes it come alive.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah,
Shakespeare
there-
lends himself to so many different interpretations.
And that's the same
Exactly.
with if you read the play, that won't really tell you
Mm-hmm.
whether it's any good or not as a play necessarily till you really get to see it and add that bringing it to life on the stage
Yeah.
And I feel like Tolkien too.
or
When
animation.
I'm talking about Tolkien as a friend, I mean he was slow to trust, but once you gained his trust, you had it. you
Very,
know?
very loyal.
And-
Very hard to let go of that. Like
Exactly.
what happened with
And
C.S.
so
Lewis.
therefore what would wound him the most
Yeah,
would be where
a betrayal.
where
Yeah.
somebody is maybe not valuing that loyalty as well, or seemingly kind of easily kind of following other interests or whatever, and being kind of a summer soldier, someone who's not as, and I think that is one of the weaknesses of Lewis, is that recognizing that, and I think Lewis didn't realize it, because I think he's like, I really enjoy Tollers, what he called Tolkien, and Charles really meant a lot to him too, but in different ways. He probably appreciated them for different reasons.
Yeah.
Whereas Tolkien probably would have been as an introvert, probably much happier just with a smaller group of people.
Yeah.
Why do you keep bringing new people in, Jack?
So is Charles Williams sort of the source of the rupture between Tolkien and Lewis, or were there other matters?
Well, I mean, there was
Factors.
always the Anglican versus Catholic difference, but
Yeah.
I think they both were willing to,
Just
clearly Williams was a little more flexible with his pagan interests and everything else. You would think.
Yes, that was a line that he was willing to cross a bit, and therefore, I mean, I met people in England who were like Williams.
Really?
Yeah. Yes. I think that's where we have to be careful. Like, I love fantasy, so, and Hawk is a great apologist for this, actually, of how fantasy can be, and Tolkien would say this in fairy stories, a great relief to the modern mind. But there's always going to be people who give things a bad rap because they get involved over their head.
Two forms of escape.
Yeah.
Healthy escape and unhealthy escape.
Unhealthy, yes.
So the way that what's her name, McGonagall, summed it up nicely. There's a more technical version, but I liked her more layperson version, which is the negative version is life sucks, so I'm going to go play games or read books or whatever, versus life is better when I have time to play games or read books, etc.
Yeah.
Those are two
That's a
very
great
different
way to-
experiences of the identical
Yep.
activities, what have you.
So
Yeah,
true.
And
I-
that is the difference between healthy and unhealthy
Right.
use.
And I think any recreational activity is healthy.
Any
As
recreational.
long as it doesn't interfere with
Right.
your daily
Your life
responsibilities.
balance,
Yeah.
exactly.
Could we say that Tolkien...
And I'm a recreational therapist, so disclaimer.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I'm sure you know all about this.
Yes, that was not a self-infomercial. but speaking from what you know, what do you think about this concept? What if would we say that Tolkien, Lewis, and Williams all represented different medieval mindsets? That, I mean, they were modern people, but like.
But they were attracted to the more
They were
medieval.
attracted to me.
And Renaissance, because the
Right.
Enlightenment was a big deal to them.
True. I mean, I look at Williams and I'm like, yeah, some of the arcane mysteries,
Mhm.
the things that people, in the Middle Ages, I see that. I also see in Lewis the animation of this man.
Can I hold
Go
you
ahead.
on that for the moment? Because I want to answer an
Yeah.
earlier question
Okay.
about Tolkien and Charles Williams' friction.
Okay,
Oh yeah.
Where I found an excerpt here.
please do.
And then we can
Yeah,
circle
that's
to that one. Okay, so is it gaming analogy?
Oh, I think it refers to like more like hunting or
Night
gaming.
gathering catches the flavor.
I don't think it's talking about gaming in terms.
No, I know. I just as the gaming
More game.
analogy shows. Oh, shuttlecock and battledore and shuttlecock. Okay, so they were trying to gather. They were trying to express the flavor of the group in this particular manner. This is by Edison, and so to that concuncial. I do not know
What
that
page is
word.
this?
What?
What page is?
This is page 267 at the bottom. Quincuntial symposium.
Wow.
At ease about your secol. Oh wow! Normally, I'm not that strained on my vocabulary.
It's like
SEACOLE,
Where
sea
are
cold
you?
fire,
Oh.
in your private chamber. Okay, because they're doing Middle English.
Symposium, yeah.
Okay, whereas it. Well, that wasn't the problem. It was the.
Could it be
seats.
quintessential? No, that's spelled
No,
very
no,
differently.
no. This is Middle English, so it's going to be
Quintessential.
strange.
Quince-
Whereas it seemed to me, MEE, so it's Middle English. Good discourse made the knight's horses gallop too fast, and so to our good night walk, and adieu in the gate under your great tower. For myself, I tasted wisdom as well as good ale at your fireside. If our talk were battledore and shuttlecock, what matter? 'Twas merry talk, and truth will sometimes appear, better than in statue, in the swift flying to and again of the shuttlecock. As the gaming analogy shows, Edison grasped the essence of the Inklings method, thrashing out the truth through verbal play. But he never shared their vision of truth, disdaining in his fiction and in his few published letters such Christian virtues as simplicity and poverty. Tolkien, who vastly admired Edison's literary skills, ranking him the most gifted of all inventors of imaginary worlds, described the philosophy that permeates every page of Ouroboros
Yep.
and his other novels as a celebration of, quote, arrogance and cruelty, end quote. Tolkien may be unjust in this assessment. Edison admired grandeur, strength, brooding intelligence and refined beauty, qualities that, under Mercury's perverse skies, flourish in lieu of love, compassion, and hobbit-like humility. Perhaps because of Tolkien's objections, the two butted heads from the start. Edison never became a regular among the Inklings. More significant and perplexing were Tolkien's reservations about Charles Williams. His response to Williams seemed inversely keyed to Lewis's. The more Lewis admired Williams, the more Tolkien demurred. Some scholars have put his disaffection down to plain jealousy of the man who displaced him as Lewis's best friend. There is truth in this. By 1939, Lewis had absorbed most of Tolkien's ideas and literary motifs and was ready to be dazzled by someone new. In a letter he would write to his former pupil, Mary Nayland, shortly after Williams's death, Lewis refers to him as, quote, "my great friend Charles Williams, my friend of friends, the comforter of all our little set, the most angelic," end quote. Small wonder that the sensitive Tolkien felt elbowed aside. Nonetheless, Tolkien enjoyed Williams's company and valued his critical acumen. During the war, he wrote a poem that reveals, if not his deepest feelings about Williams, at least those he was willing to express, as he calls Williams "Dear Charles," and lauds his subtle mind, his virtues, and his wisdom. He and Williams drank together, went on midnight strolls together, regaled one another at Inklings gatherings. Tolkien went out of his way to help Williams lecture at the university and, most tellingly, loaned him portions of the Hobbit sequel while still in manuscript.
Yeah, we read that part.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so anyway, I thought that little precursor there.
That does help. Yeah.
You read the rest of this paragraph right here? Did I miss that? Because I was multitasking?
Yep.
Or
Yeah, I think we
I
did.
don't have the book in front of me. So.
Williams immediately put his finger in one great strength of the tale?
Yes, we read
Okay,
that.
that was the part you got to. Okay, so it was just that precursor that... Okay.
Well, there's a famous quote, and maybe Chris can find this too, but it had to do with once Jack died, or maybe it was when Charles Williams died, and it was that comment about how maybe it was Tolkien that said that part that Charles brought out in Jack also died with Charles. Do you remember the quote I'm talking about, Chris?
I haven't come across that one.
Okay, I'll see if I can find it.
Meanwhile, dead air.
Hold on.
Excuse me. Yeah, the next chapter is Lewis. Other thoughts while you're waiting for Brian here? Chris, Gary?
Not really.
Well, I would seem to identify with Tolkien a little bit more than Williams, and I grew up in a church in Port Orchard that definitely had a character that reminds me of Charles Williams. In the way that he would continue to bring about different skits and vignettes and other things within the church to keep things lively, and it definitely brings back some memories, but also brings back some memories of my distaste of some of the things that went too far. And so I wonder if certain members of the Inklings did leave or stay away or never joined in the first place because Williams was there.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. Well, shall we go ahead and transition to Letters of Tolkien 201, if that sounds okay? And then perhaps take this and continue the conversation next month
Okay.
on the Inklings. I think it'd be nice to look at some of the other Inklings as well, and other authors who are peers of Tolkien. I really love how we've been able to discover several of them, like Edison, Dylan Thomas, different people who kind of were aware of him. So
Cool.
and even Peter S. Beagle, I don't know whether or not he ever met Tolkien or not, but he reviewed The Lord of the Rings at one point and spoke highly of it. So, while Tolkien is still alive. So it'd just be interesting to see who kind of helped Tolkien to become more accepted or more widely known. But let's do that if that sounds okay. We have letter 201.
Okay.
If anybody wants to read it, yeah.
Sure, I'll read it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, go for
I
it.
can start.
Sure.
Letter 201 from a letter
So I might
to
read more than one.
from a letter to Rainer Unwin, September 7th, 1957. On September 4th, Tolkien was visited by representatives of the American company, which was interested in making an animated film of The Lord of the Rings. He was given a copy of the synopsis of the film, which he agreed to read. Tolkien writes, "You will receive on Monday the copy of the storyline or synopsis of the proposed film version of The Lord of the Rings. I could not get it off yesterday. An abridgment by selection with some good picture work would be pleasant, and perhaps worth a good deal in publicity, but the present script is rather a compression with the resultant overcrowding and confusion, blurring of climaxes, and general degradation, a pullback towards more conventional fairy stories. People gallop about on eagles at the least provocation. Lothian becomes a fairy castle with delicate minarets and all that sort of thing. But I am quite prepared to play ball if they are open to advice, and if you decide that the thing is genuine and worthwhile."
Gallop along on eagles without much provocation. Imagine if we tried to walk all the way to Mordor. One of us might have died. The way the Lord of the Rings should have ended. You
Yes.
seen that meme?
Yeah, or the video with the eagle, just the
Yeah,
eagles.
it's a video. Yeah.
Where are we going?
I wonder what Tolkien would think about Peter Jackson's.
Well, I've always asked myself that question, and I don't know.
It's really hard to tell. I mean, it
Even though-
depends which Tolkien. The younger Tolkien, the
Yeah,
Tolkien, the end of
right.
his
The more
life.
curmudgeonly one versus the more
I
open.
mean, he stated at certain points of his life that he was open to stage plays, but he thought that he wouldn't be able to carry it off.
Right. Yeah. And we know how Christopher felt. He
Just-
did not mince words.
Yeah.
Yes, he,
Don't mince words, Bones. Tell us what you really think.
They eviscerated the book. It's like as well, Christopher.
the movie.
Yeah.
Before we read the next, go ahead and discuss that. But before we read the next one, I have a little administrative thing we need to cover about Tolkien Moot. But
Yeah.
Oh,
please,
Good point. Thank you. For
please
bringing
continue the discussion on this letter first.
Let me see.
that up. Yeah. Anything else in letter 201 that Chris or Gary or Anthony have any comments on that?
Well, I think Tolkien was always amenable to some sort of adaptation, whether it be on the screen, the stage, or...
But whether it would have ever been good enough for what was in his head, right?
Exactly.
That's a very tough one.
Like, as Christopher, as his son once said, I think any sort of adaptation is never going to be perfect. It's
Yeah.
there's always going to have to, cuts are always going to have to be made.
Sure.
Or, truncations or what have you. So, if you wanted to really make a faithful adaptation of Lord of the Rings, you probably would have had it turned into a television miniseries.
That's what I always argued it was a BBC series,
Yeah.
like they did with Ivanhoe and Arthur and a few others, Robin Hood and a few others like that.
Yeah.
Were ongoing BBC style, where they didn't have a big budget, so it had to be about the characters and the story and not about
Special
effects and all
effects.
of that. Yeah, so you had to focus on zoom in on that because of budget. And I think you end up with a better, closer to what it was intended.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, this was going to be a cartoon though.
Yeah.
Sure.
Animated film, so you've got more latitude that way.
Sure.
True.
But time is always of the essence, and
Yeah.
I mean, you're looking at the scope of the Lord of the Rings, and I mean, I think Tolkien liked the potential publicity, but In fact, he probably wanted it. However, whether they could do a good job or maybe it would have a, counter effect or something that he wanted. I don't know.
Well, the animated movies, not the rotoscope, but the animated Hobbit and Return of the King in the 70s, early 80s, whatever it was, greatly impacted both Brian and I, right? As cheesy and other things as they are,
But you're a kid.
they had such an impact as kids.
Yeah.
Between
My daughter-
and the music, right? That's the number one thing about Jackson I felt he never quite got was the importance of music. And that was such a key part of Tolkien's entire legendarium.
So what Hawk's referring to has to do with the music within the Lord
I
of the
see.
Rings.
Right, I don't mean the soundtrack.
The soundtrack I think is amazing.
I don't mean the
It's a
soundtrack.
great soundtrack.
I mean that he
Within
has
that.
so many characters singing
Yeah.
throughout the stories, and there's very little of that in the movies.
Yeah, I agree.
There's a little,
Yeah.
and I like them, right? I like what
Yeah,
they did,
like,
but it was minimal. And Tolkien had song left and right all over the place.
Right.
And Tolkien always said, he wasn't a musician.
Yeah.
He wanted others to do it, and he was happy with what a lot of others created. I have one of those albums where
Yeah. Dawn
he's with a
Swan.
composer, and
Yeah.
I have that on LP and stuff.
Don't you think it's because, unfortunately, and I do watch a lot of foreign films. So when you're exposed to different cultures and how they bring something to film, we tend to think in these like it's a musical or it's not.
And be afraid that it would make it too much of a musical.
Well, I think so.
Because India, that's not an issue.
It's
with
not an
Bollywood.
issue.
Really?
Exactly. They'd be like, "Oh, we can."
You'll
do that.
go an hour without any music, and all of a sudden you have 30 minutes of nothing but dance and music, and it's all part of the story.
It's all part of the story,
and it's not a musical.
I'm just saying
that's
they
the way
could
he tells the story.
easily,
Yeah.
they could have accommodated that.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, we've got some characters singing,
Yeah.
and then it goes into prose.
And I agree because, like you see, this is a cheesy example, but the Xena and Hercules series were not musicals, but they would always have like one episode, the musical episode,
Sure.
where it broke into song and dance
Yes.
throughout the episode. But they didn't mix it. It was always
But
all
see,
or
this
nothing.
is the bizarre
There's
thing
nothing
about
in between.
American culture. Like if you watch a kids show like Phineas and Ferb, there's like lots of like, oh, we're now moving into a song piece,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's back to like dialogue,
Mm-hmm.
right? We can do that with kids shows,
Mm-hmm.
but we can't do this with movies for adults. Why?
Yeah, I don't know. I disagree with the people who think you can't.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, I'm not into that kind of
I'm
stuff.
saying it could be
but
challenging.
I can't,
Making it segue properly, but totally doable. And I think Tolkien wrote it
Yeah.
so that it could. I mean,
And how many ballads do modern Americans listen to? I mean, songs, yes.
Yeah,
mean,
pop music is
Pop music,
ubiquitous.
there are a lot of ballads.
Yeah.
But hey, that's in this category.
Yeah.
We like to keep things in
Over
their compartments.
compartmentalization.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's the problem.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And again, the entire mythos of Tolkien's legendarium was hinged on music.
Mm.
The creation
Yeah,
of it is all
exactly.
music based.
Yeah.
And I always felt like part of the reason why he kept having music be and song, certainly in the letter, was to just keep remembering the Song of Arda. The Song of Arda is everywhere. It affects everything that is being done, and these are all voices contributing to the song, which is all of the creation.
And then there's also these layers, right?
Yes.
In which, when you're watching a film and there's music in the background,
Right.
you
the
understand
mood
that that's
music and all
not what
that,
the characters in the movie
Are
are
hearing.
hearing.
Except for the comedies that go, what was that? Where's that coming from?
Exactly.
Break the fourth wall.
Right,
Those are funny. Yeah,
right.
yes.
But to us, that's meant to kind of help
Enhance
us
the mood.
enter into a
And-
mood.
And it's effective.
But when the characters are aware and they're creating music within it,
Mm-hmm.
suddenly that's a different thing.
Yeah, I mean they did it with the beer so brown in the tavern.
It's true.
So he did do some.
It's
He
true.
did do some,
And-
and I was very excited about
And
those
Viggo
pieces.
Mortensen actually was allowed to create his own little song there at
Yeah.
the end of the coronation,
Yeah.
which was then translated.
Right.
Man, West. It's
Yes.
interesting to me that there is that. But I'm like, no,
Yeah.
I want more.
Yeah, I really, because you saw it in the animated versions, they made it work. Where there's a whip, there's a way. It was all part of the music, but there was a lot of music in those cartoons, and it wasn't a musical.
Nope.
But those were songs from Tolkien stuff, and they crammed them into the short cartoon time, the 1 hour, whatever it was, and did fine. And I think that's something. Whoever the next incarnation of the Lord of the Rings is, I hope that they bring more of that music
Well,
to it.
I'll tell you right now, straight up here, that if Rings of Power finds a way in the storytelling to include
I hope they do the
authentic,
I Knew Lindelay.
believable pieces of music that, like with the elves, for example,
Yeah, Elsa can sing it.
with subtitles.
because they love to party. Elves got a party.
Tra-la-la-la.
That's right. I was thinking more of the Lost in Mirkwood, where the light kept going out, and then they
Yes.
hear another party and another. Like, boy, that's a hardcore party, man.
Right.
Like, let's reset up. Oh, the cops are coming. Disappear. Set up another place. Oh, cops are coming. Disappear.
Well,
I've
so you
known
think all the
parties like
hippies,
that.
all the hippies loved it, right? Yeah.
I've literally known parties that when the cops are coming, everybody went out the back door, went to a building a few buildings away, and the party started back up
Oh
again.
my gosh, that's funny.
Somehow, I don't think that's what the elves were doing.
No, but
They're like, oh, we're being watched.
yes.
Oh, gosh,
yeah,
I'm so-
it's their private.
I'm
elf
so
thing.
embarrassed.
Yes.
Don't watch our party. Okay, we have 9 minutes left.
Okay.
So we
Tolkien Moot.
Nice.
Tolkien Moot 19, I think it is.
Wow.
I think.
I'll look it up.
Yeah, maybe 18. I forget. So this is continuing the Numenorian arc, which is appropriate for what's coming. We can't do. We were going to do the 3rd July. It turns out there's a conflict with Brian's schedule, and we really want Brian to be there.
Yeah.
And so he proposed a couple of different dates. Is the July
I could do either.
30th
I could do the
one
July
okay?
30, or I think I could do the August.
My
20 as
concern
well.
with the August one is it's just that much later
Right.
and that much closer to school starting back up, etc.
Yep.
I don't think July 30th is a big conflict, but I don't really know. It might be a conflict in some of the gamer world with Gen Con and stuff, but generally those are people who can afford to go to Gen Con, and they're not usually the same as all the Tolkien folks. So.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're still only talking 1 day for Tolkien Moot at this stage. I hope next year though we'll actually be able to do 2 or 3 days again, because we'll have a place.
Yeah.
So it looks like we're going to be good. We're getting insurance this week at the RPG Center. We have to expand it to support events, but it looks like we'll be able to do so now. We got the water connected yesterday.
Yay!
I got to finish hooking up. There's a problem with one of the toilets not getting water, but anyway. So the place is going to be ready in time for Tolkien Moot. So that's the good news. We can host Tolkien Moot at the RPG Center.
That's Tolkien Moot 18 this year.
It is 18. Okay. But it would have been July 16th if we were on our normal schedule. We need to bump it to July 30th. Does anybody have a problem with that? Does that work for everybody? It's not a problem for me.
I don't think me neither.
I mean, if you're even intending to attend, and of course you can attend remotely if you want. Because we'll have our Tolkien Society meeting then. We won't do a Tolkien Society meeting on the 16th. It will be pushed to when Tolkien Moot is at. That's when we do, whenever Tolkien Moot is that month, that's when we do our Tolkien Society meeting in the middle of the event.
Okay.
We do it at the same time, and that's usually when we try to bring in special guest speakers and stuff like that too.
Tolkien 18. No, I think that's
The
good.
July 30th.
All day.
So because I can then, I can have ready by today, tomorrow, the RSVP set up with all the new info and put the word out, and then everybody can start RSVP.
So would it be at the museum or here?
It'll be at the RPG Center,
Or center?
Speaking
101
of,
North Stone Street.
next month we would be.
Yes. The other thing is, this is the last time we're meeting here at my house. Because we now have the pieces we need,
Yeah.
we will start meeting at the 101 North Stone Street RPG Center.
Cool.
It'll be upstairs, because that's where the studio is. Next month. So starting next month, meetings will be there, which will make it more open to the public. Right up here, we're remote. There's no buses near here. We're on a dead end street on the side of a hill, in a little nicer neighborhood. It's
Kinda like Back End.
and I don't want to just bring random strangers in all the time that haven't been vetted, etc. So, but down at the center, it's a community center, and so we'll be able to have our doors open to a lot more potential community participation. with it being at a more central, because it's in closer to the center of the city. It's East Central Spokane. So that's another thing is everybody, next meeting will be at 101 North Stone Street.
It'll be
Cool.
June 18, I think.
June
Okay.
18th. Yeah.
Yes, June 18th, correct, from 1 to 3.
Stone Street.
Yeah, and then that's where Tolkien Moot will be as well.
Is it North Stone Street?
Yes, 101 North Stone Street.
Got it.
Spokane, Washington, 99202.
I still think we need to do some kind of play on the whole Gondolin, Gond, because Gondor, stone, Gond means stone in Elvish.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay, all right, figure something out.
Maybe Gond
As in
with
Gone.
wind.
That's funny.
I'm sure there's a rock song.
Yeah, I'm sure. Look up the Tolkien music list from Professor Seaman. Chris has
Yeah,
that
yeah.
whole list. So that kind of lets us know for the next 2 months, again, we'll be at the center going forward. It also means more capacity. So it still depends on how many GMs we have. But so the minimum we're going to be set up for the community center is 3 tables right downstairs. For special events, I was just counting yesterday, when we have the bus and the trailers and we convert some of the rooms that normally aren't game tables into game table rooms,
Yep.
and we have the museum space with those 4 other rooms, we can potentially squeeze in 20 tables on the whole property, all interior with air conditioning, etc. Or eventually air conditioning. You know, the center needs donations for air conditioning. I'm going to be bringing down my AC down to there, but we potentially can support up to 20 tables eventually.
Wow.
We just need to have enough people to do it. So that's great. We could have the real capacity, because we never really wanted Tolkien Moot to get larger than about 100 people or so, and that's the right amount. So so that's exciting. So that's just something to be aware of. So we will no longer be in this studio. We will be at the much larger studio, which, by the way, can also be. We have 2 sets. We have the table set, which is kind of like this, right? We're around a table and everything, or we have the sofa set, where we can just kick back and be talking to each other over a coffee table with our tea or whatever, and doing it that way. And it's the same exact studio. It's just the camera pans left for the table setup, or right for the couch
Oh,
setup.
I vote for the couch.
Oh yeah. Couch potatoes.
There you go.
And so that's what it will be, comfortable seating in that style. And it's all surrounded by green screen in every direction and a green
So
screen
could we
floor.
be like couches in a forest?
Yeah, exactly. We see our forest background right now.
Oh yes.
Oh.
So, and if you see the green, where the green screen is, see the forest peeking through?
Yes.
That will be all around us, because it's completely enclosed by green screen, and the floor is green screen, so you can actually have a forest floor at your feet.
Fantastic.
So that's what we'll be at next month.
Cool.
Woohoo! All right, so just remember that 101 North Stone Street at the RPG Center, 2nd floor.
But if you're joining us virtually
Or remotely.
it will be the same.
Everything
way.
else will be the same.
Yes.
No changes there.
How easy is that? That was a
The only
rhetorical
thing I'm
question.
seeing this whole meeting was a round circle with the letters HS in the middle.
Oh, did it stop again?
What's going on?
Chris, are you seeing us?
Nope.
How long have you not been able to see us?
The entire
Whole time.
meeting.
The whole meeting? Oh my god.
Oh,
We should've-
please say, if you see something, say something.
I just thought that you didn't, you and Anthony and Brian just didn't, have.
No, because we see us in Jitsi and everything. So it might be that you needed to refresh your browser. If you go into YouTube and watch, you'll see that we were there the whole time. But
Disembodied souls.
interesting.
Let's refresh again.
Chris,
F5 or-
Chris, can you refresh your browser quickly just to see if that
Yeah,
makes
let's
it so you
test
can
it
see?
out, because we'll
Just
have to,
yeah,
we'll
we
have
want
to
to
figure
know
this out
for
next
future
time.
reference. Yeah. Did that make a difference? Oh, they both do.
Oh, do they both exit?
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
And of course we're flipped as well. Are we supposed to be flipped?
Well, that's the yes.
I'm not seeing it.
Weird. All right, let me try us doing that.
Wow, I'm really impressed with your ability to pay attention while we've been faceless here.
Okay, Chris, any luck?
Nope.
All right, I'll be right back.
Huh.
Well, that's annoying. Because we could see it in Jitsi
Yeah, I
there.
probably should fix it now so as to avoid.
Yeah.
Well,
this from happening.
it should have been.
I'm gonna use the restroom.
Yeah, I wish they would have said something earlier.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
Oh, darn it. Okay, how about now?
Now we can kind of see you. Oh, it's Brian.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see it. It says
Brian.
Tolkien Society. Yeah, that's kind of neat. It's kind of vague, though. It's not
It's
easy.
vague?
Yeah,
Like
not
blurry?
easy to see, but yeah, I get the idea at least.
Really?
So
I
maybe
mean, it's not. Oh, it's clear. That's a.
Oh, it's just taking a while to the
Buffer.
algorithm queuing
Yeah.
up. Yeah, okay.
Come in
It's
focus.
adjusting to your bandwidth. Okay.
Okay.
Chris, how's it
Yeah.
looking on your end?
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Because this mode allows you, when we want to, like, you can see how I can move the stuff around,
Yeah.
right? This makes it so that you're seeing what the audience is seeing as well, sort of. So like if we want to post up photos and video and stuff, this makes it easier to do so. Okay, so if it happens again, let me know, because it looks like we just had to refresh on our end when we changed cameras. So thanks for saying something there. At least we know to watch for it.
right. We'll make
All
sure
right.
that's fixed next time.
So we'll be back again a month from now, June 18th from 1 to 3 p.m. Pacific time. We're right here on youtube.com/Tolkien Scholars. Our website's tolkienscholars.org, and twitter.com/Tolkien Scholars, or just at Tolkien Scholars. And then the month after that will be Tolkien. So check the website by tomorrow.
Yep.
You should be able to RSVP. Even if you're going to be remote, please RSVP once it's available. It just helps us plan accordingly what resources we need to have ready.
Because our Tolkien Society meeting will be embedded in that, and
Right.
so it will not be the third Saturday in July.
It'll
It will
be
be
the
the
5th.
30th, the 5th.
Yeah, it's the fifth Saturday.
Fifth Saturday.
Yeah.
We're all about odd numbers here, or prime
Well,
numbers.
very odd. But yeah, so we'll see you all next month, wherever you may be. Be well, and Namarie.
Namarie.
Namarie.